The storm outside roared like an angry beast, lightning flickering across the skyline of New York City. Inside the penthouse of glass and gold, silence weighed heavily. The kind of silence that comes only when lives are unraveling in secret. Clara Johnson, the maid who had worked in that mansion for almost 10 years, was scrubbing the marble counters when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her heart sank. It was the hospital again. Emma's Johnson. The nurse's voice trembled. "I'm afraid your daughter's condition is deteriorating. Without the surgery, we don't have much time left." Clara's hand froze on the rag. Her daughter, Layla, her only child, was just 12 years old, a bright-eyed girl who dreamed of becoming a painter. For months, Clara had begged, borrowed, and pleaded for money, but the medical bills towered higher than she could ever climb. Every paycheck was swallowed by hospital fees, rent, and food. Hope was thinning, like the last flicker of a candle, and then Clara's eyes lifted. Across the counter, in the corner of the penthouse office, sat the billionaire's leather briefcase. She had seen him, Mr. Richard Sterling, slip envelopes of cash inside. He was a man of immeasurable wealth, owner of hotels, airlines, even a foundation that gave millions to causes overseas. Yet here Clara was, mopping his floors, watching her daughter's life slip away because she could not afford one surgery. Her pulse pounded. Her mind screamed, "Don't do it." But another voice whispered, "What mother wouldn't?" Hands trembling, she crossed the polished floor. Every creak of the briefcase latch echoed like thunder in her ears. Inside, bundles of crisp bills gleamed like salvation itself. Clara stuffed them into her bag, her tears blurring the sight. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling," she whispered to the empty room, "but I have no choice." The next day, Richard Sterling returned from his board meeting. He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that commanded every room. But beneath the armor of wealth and reputation, he was a lonely man. His wife had passed away years ago, and his son lived abroad, estranged. Money had bought him everything except family, except warmth. As he poured himself a glass of whiskey that evening, he noticed the briefcase. Open, lighter than it should be. His sharp eyes narrowed. Richard was not a man easily fooled. Years of business had taught him to read betrayal like a second language. He ordered the cameras pulled, watched the footage, and there it was, Clara Johnson, the maid he had trusted for a decade, slipping the cash into her bag. His jaw tightened, fury igniting, but then, confusion. Why Clara? Why now? She had always been honest, almost to a fault. What could have pushed her to this? Instead of calling the police, Richard made a quiet decision. He would find out. That night, Clara sat at her daughter's hospital bedside. Layla's small hand was cold, the machines around her beeping faintly. Clara had already handed over the money to the hospital, begging them to schedule the surgery immediately. "Baby, you're going to be okay," she whispered, stroking her daughter's curls. "Mama took care of it, you just rest." She didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. When Clara turned, her blood drained. Richard Sterling stood in the doorway. Her breath hitched. "Mr. Sterling." The look in his eyes was unreadable. He glanced at the machines, the frail girl in the bed, the trembling woman at her side. "So this is why," he said quietly. Clara's lips quivered. Please forgive me. I didn't know what else to do. I was desperate. She's all I have." Tears poured down her cheeks. "I swear I wasn't trying to steal for myself. I was just trying to save my baby." For a long moment, Richard said nothing. He simply looked at the child, her tiny chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Then he looked back at Clara, and for the first time in years, something in his chest cracked open. He remembered the nights he had sat in hospitals, begging for his wife's life, only to watch her fade. He remembered helplessness, he remembered loss, and suddenly, his anger melted into something else entirely. The next morning, the hospital staff buzzed with disbelief. A renowned surgeon, one who normally only operated on high-profile patients, arrived personally for Layla's procedure. The bills, every cent, were paid in full. A private wing was arranged, the best nurses assigned. Clara stared at the paperwork with trembling hands. Someone had covered not just the surgery but years of future treatments, therapies, even college funds. Her eyes darted across the signature at the bottom. Richard Sterling. She couldn't believe it. When she found him waiting outside the room, she fell to her knees. "Why? After what I did to you, why would you?" Richard gently lifted her to her feet. His voice was low, rough with emotion. "Because I know what it feels like to lose someone you love, and no mother should have to choose between poverty and her child's life." Clara sobbed into her hands. "I don't deserve this kindness." He shook his head. "You deserve more than you've ever been given. And from this day forward, you'll never have to worry again." Weeks later, Layla recovered faster than anyone expected. Her laughter once again filled the hospital halls, her sketches decorating the walls of her room. She often asked who the tall man was who brought her art supplies and sat quietly by her bed, listening to her stories. "That's Mr. Sterling," Clara would say softly. "The man who saved us." But Richard always shook his head. "No, Layla, you saved me." And he meant it. For the first time in decades, Richard felt human again. Not just a man with billions, not just a businessman, but a man capable of love, compassion, and purpose. Clara returned to work, but no longer as a maid. Richard offered her a role in his foundation, helping families who were drowning under the weight of medical bills, just like she had been. Her lived experience gave her a voice that people trusted, a heart that resonated deeply. Together, Clara, Layla, and Richard formed something unexpected. Not employer and servant, not billionaire and maid, but a family, built not on blood, but on sacrifice, compassion, and second chances. And in the end, when people whispered about the scandal, the black maid who had stolen money from her billionaire boss, they never expected the ending. They never expected the billionaire to forgive her, to save her daughter, to change her life forever, and yet, that's exactly what he did.